Si vis pacem, bellum. This is one of the most famous Latin phrases ever spoken and has been quoted, paraphrased, and altered by so many important historical figures. A variation of it was used by George Washington in the first annual address to a joint session of Congress in 1790. A variation of it was used by historian Antoine Fauvelet de Bourrienne in regards to Napoleon, in which he changed the old adage to say si vis bellum para pacem, which had the opposite meaning. But what does this phrase mean exactly? Translated, it means if you want peace, prepare for war, and no better phrase can fit the Akatsuki more than this. Men of peace, prepare for war. The Akatsuki were an organization that started out dedicated to peace, in which they would fight to defend those who could not defend themselves. This group became popular and were viewed with a similar eye as those who would view Robinhood and his band. But as with all things, the limits and borders often become blurred, and the more that the world system creeps in, the harder it is to say where the good ends and the bad begins. Everything just sorta mixes together into a confusing gray. And this is only made worse with the haze of death and sorrow brought on by pain. Eventually, the peacemakers become warmakers, deciding that they would do anything to achieve peace, even if it meant becoming what they saw as a necessary evil. But then again, Naruto never fell victim to this. In the last part of this video's opening spiel, by the way, if you haven't seen it, I recommend it, I mentioned that one of the things I love the most about Naruto is the characterization. To see Naruto compared to others. Naruto was a man of peace, but he never let his ideals be clouded with compromise. Even if he was hated, he stood up for what he believed was right. If only all of us could be so bold. Naruto refused to compromise. When asked if he would choose to protect Sasuke or protect the village, Naruto merely responded that he would protect both. And damned if he didn't make good on his promise. But then again, what can you expect? His nindo is honest, a level of integrity that all men and women should strive for. So what if we take Naruto and his unwavering convictions and knowledge of what is right and place him in a situation where even his friends wish to travel down a dark path? Will he too compromise, or will he stand for what's right and necessary to facilitate his dream through peace? Si vis pacem, bellum. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so if you subscribe right now, next time you're out and about, you will get to see a John Wick firefight fly by you in the street. If you don't hit subscribe, well, you may become collateral damage. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. The rain continued to fall. The sun had gone down. Not that it made much of a difference, but all the same, it was nighttime. They were looking over a rather small village. Naruto in the trees, Yahiko on the ground. Conan was with those gathered within for protection and defense, and Nagato was on a rooftop. This poor, tiny village had been sacked over 3 times in 1 month. Being that Amagi and the surrounding area were all flanked by shinobi nations, such a village had often been attacked itself by the Hidden Stone, who needed more resources to keep the war going. In fear, this tiny village reached out to buy help with its meager funds. Maybe it couldn't hire big-name elite shinobi, but they would take whatever they could get at this time. They were tired of their tiny village being the source of fighting. So many innocent men, women, and children had been killed or starved because they either resisted or didn't resist. An entire way of life was on the line, and those who could do something about it didn't. And so that's where they were now. That was the state of things. There was never a job too small for the Akatsuki. The smaller the village, the tougher the work and the less the reward. But someone had to defend the weak, and that was the MO of the Akatsuki. If they couldn't bring peace to a simple village caught between warring nations, how could they ever hope to save the world and bring peace? They kept guard. Word had come in that another raid was on its way, so our modest little group of heroes for hire simply waited, offering fortification and defense, preparing for what was to come. So far, they seemed like they were ready. Nagato kept his eyes on the horizon to see if any were coming. Conan was on the ground, and Yahiko would be the olive branch extended to the raiders. Naruto, though, he was what came when that olive branch was rejected. Paper bombs, shuriken, and crossbows, he had them all set up as traps around the village, connected by a massive fishing line that he held in his hand. In the distance, he heard a distinct whistle that came from Nagato. This was the signal. He'd seen something, likely the oncoming threat. He got into position, ready to fight. Yahiko merely stood there, waiting. Suddenly, the men showed up. Yahiko stepped forward. Really? This is your 4th attempt in 3 days. Every time we've sent you and your crew packing. Why do you keep doing this, Kyusuke? The shinobi scoffed. We need food. They have food. It's simple, really. Yahiko shook his head. No, I'm talking about continuing to return and cause trouble even when we show up to defeat you. The shinobi remained silent, merely pulling out a weapon with which to strike back with. Yahiko sighed. Are you really going to force us to do this again? Kyusuke nodded. I will. Every day until I get what I want. Yahiko looked to Nagato, who would once more whistle. This time a different signal. Every projectile, every crossbow, every shuriken all converged on the location of the enemy as a smoke bomb activated below their feet and blurred their vision. The weapons went in. It wasn't even a close battle. They all hit the ground. As the smoke faded, the enemy was defeated. Yahiko came down to their side. None of the attacks were lethal, and that was thanks to his own design, but they were incapacitated. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? Why not leave the village alone? Kyusuke growled. Because we need the food. Yahiko raised a brow. You're going hungry. Kyusuke nodded. If you're gonna kill us, then do so now. Because if you don't, we'll keep coming back here every day until we get what we want. Yahiko smiled. Then I'll be here. I'll do this with you every day I have to in perpetuity. And when I defeat you then, I'll spare you, just as I'm doing now. They began to remove their various kunai and shuriken. He then handed them tools to properly care for their wounds. If you truly have nothing, then take this. Don't let yourselves get sick. Kyusuke took the first aid kit and looked up questionably, his heart unable to understand why this man was the way he was. How could one be so kind? How could one refuse to kill even though the threat would return endlessly? It made no sense to him. As if sensing what this man was thinking, Yahiko spoke. Peace is something achieved by peacefulness. War brings ruin and hatred is the enemy of peace. I will spread love through strength, and I will bring peace to the world by example. So if you must return every day, then at least heal your wounds before you try again. I don't want you dying for this. The group left. Yahiko breathed a sigh of relief. He turned around and began to head back to the building where Conan and the citizens were holed up. He stepped in and sat down with a sigh of relief. Well, that should buy us at least one day. Naruto popped in as well. I guess it really is sad. They just want to eat, Naruto said. Yahiko looked up. Yeah, that's true, but they are attempting to steal it after all. Conan looked back. Were we so different? Yahiko couldn't retort as she made a good point. He merely reclined against the back of his chair. He looked to the villagers. Do you believe that we could spare some food for them? The villagers shook their head. As much as we would like to help those in need, we're barely capable of feeding ourselves. Maybe if they helped work the land. Yahiko thought about it. As much as they've attacked you, if they apologize and attempt to join the village, would you accept them? The village elder thought for a moment. Because of their actions, many of our citizens died. I do not know if we can safely let them into the village, even if they do help. Yahiko sighed. What a bother. He couldn't blame the villagers, but at the same time he could only barely blame the raiders. They had no food and were fighting to live. When society failed, humanity always reverted back to the laws in the wild, in which it was eat or be eaten, kill or be killed. And that's what was happening here. The 5 great shinobi nations were breaking down, and the people below them were suffering for it. As Yahiko rested for a few hours though, he was suddenly startled from his doze by the loud whistling of Nagato. Yahiko stood. What? Already? He stepped out of the village and into the opening as the village elders steered everyone towards their safe place. Yahiko walked out to meet them. Are you even in any condition to continue this? Yahiko asked. But to his surprise, Kyusuke spoke. No, we're not. We've reached a consensus. Your views of the world have inspired us. Please, forgive us for what we've done. We beg you. We also wish to bring peace to the world and leave our days of banditry behind. Yahiko was startled by this show of fealty. Please, let us join you. Your vision for the world is something we can all agree that's what we desire as well. We've lived our lives aimlessly, only serving ourselves and the unworthy. Please, let us work in service to your dream that we would like so desperately to see come to pass. Please. Naruto sees the display before him and questions it. What's going on here? Yahiko would go on to explain it to them all. Conan listens. She's slightly skeptical, but both Naruto and Nagato agree that this is worth considering. Yahiko looks to them. So, what do you say? Should we let them join? Slowly, Naruto raises a thumb up. Yahiko looks to Nagato, who also raises his thumb in approval. Yahiko finally looks to Conan. The decision's up to you, Conan. I won't approve of this unless the entire team is comfortable with it. If you have any reservations, now's the time. It's gotta be unanimous. Should we let them join? Conan sits there for a moment and thinks about it, and remembers how they too once stole to survive, and how they had also killed to live. She thought deeply on it before finally lifting her thumb up as well. Yahiko smiled and lifted his thumb finally. He turned back to the others and spoke. We'll let you join us, but only on the condition that you leave your lawless lives behind, and spend all of your waking moments selflessly giving yourself for others. Each new member nodded and accepted these terms. This was enough to make Yahiko break out into the widest grin. The village would go to pay the group for a job well done, but Yahiko would raise his hand and refuse it. He would say that they acquired something far greater than money. As they left the village, Conan asked if it was the right thing to do. "If we get a reputation of always working for free, then nobody will pay us." Yahiko would look to her as they ran into the twilight of the rising sun. "We're not doing this for money though." "Perhaps not, but we still require it to live," Nagato said. Yahiko looked over. "And so do they." Naruto chimed in from behind. "It's a good thing, guys. Those people have problems, and they have the money and resources to pick themselves up off the ground. And they now have the same kindness in their hearts as we do, meaning it'll likely be paid forward." Yahiko laughed as Naruto understood perfectly. As they ran into the sunrise, Yahiko spoke. "Guys, we just lit the opening sparks. Soon the whole world will be on fire, and it'll be burning a passionate red, a fire of love." "We still don't have a proper name," Nagato said. Yahiko thought about it. He looked to Conan for inspiration. She merely stated a fact. "You are our leader, Yahiko. We'll follow you wherever you lead." Yahiko looked forward. "Then I'll lead you into the new dawn, daybreak. We'll call ourselves the Akatsuki. In that way, we'll never lose track of who we are or what we desire." Continuing to run, they let off a collective huzzah and prepared to pave the way for their future. They became well known far and wide as both an incredible paramilitary force and as a humanitarian aid group. The war-torn lands of the world were grateful for their help. That being said, the Akatsuki didn't stay only in Ame, but they went where they were needed. And currently, the #1 place they needed to go was Kusagakure. Once there, they were taken in by the beauty of the village. Kusa was a beautiful place. Yahiko looked around though as he saw the wounded. It's sad. Kusa was actively trying to broker peace between Iwa and Konoha. It seems that their efforts fell through. The group made their way through the streets. They had been hired because something of incredible power had been taken. They made their way to the office of Zosui, the leader of Kusagakure. "So, is this guy like the Kusakage?" Naruto asked. Yahiko shrugged. "Functionally, yes, but I don't actually recall if he calls himself that." They're led to the office and the door opens. There stands a man with short dark hair, a heavy build, sharp cheekbones, and a wide nose. He wastes no time getting to business, not even waiting for them to introduce themselves. "Recently, we unearthed a relic of the ancient past. We had hidden it well, but Iwagakure found out about it and took it from us. The group that took the relic was led by General Nishikiyama. We sent a scout team after them. They should be about 15 clicks to the north. Find the commander and he'll fill you in on the mission. Get going." Yahiko had yet to lower his finger or even close his mouth from his attempt to talk. He slowly let out the breath he'd been holding in. "Can you at least tell us what was taken from you? Anything at all?" Zosui would turn back for only a moment. "Didn't I tell you? The commander of the scout party I sent out will inform you of everything. Now go." Yahiko seemed less than thrilled to be talked at like this, but he held it in and turned to begin to leave. As they made their way out of the building, Naruto looked over at Yahiko. "Do you plan to make Kusa pay for our help, Yahi?" Yahiko scoffed. "I'm gonna make them pay up their arrears." They rushed off, making their way into the direction that they were commanded. Finding camp, there was a small scuffle as it was unsure if they were truly the mercs that had been hired or if were merely spies for Iwa. But after clearing things up with the paper presented to them, they were escorted to the tent of Commander Kiryu. The commander appeared stern, yet there was something soft in his eyes. "We're here for more information in regards to the mission." The commander nodded. "About 5 days ago, an object of immense worth was stolen from us. We recently uncovered an artifact from the era of the Sage of Six Paths, known as the Kokuraku no Hako." "The Box of Ultimate Bliss?" Naruto asked. The commander nodded. "We had believed it to only be of legend, and when it appeared in our dig sites, we were astounded. Word reached Iwa, and they sent one of their generals to take it by force." Nagato then began to ask important questions. "What does this box do?" Commander Kiryu then began to explain. "In antiquity, it was believed that whoever possessed the box and opened it would have whatever they desired granted to them. Any wish, any desire." "You know that's hogwash, right?" Conan said. "Dreams don't just come true because you open a box." The commander shrugged. "If you had told me 3 months ago that the Box of Ultimate Bliss existed, I would have said that was hogwash too." "So you actually believe the story?" Yahiko asked. "I have no choice not to," the commander said. "Even if it isn't true, it's still an important artifact from our past. And if it is true, then you don't want anyone having that. According to myth, Kusagakure nearly ruled the world with it about 1,000 years ago. So if it's true in any capacity, it cannot be left in Iwa's hands. In fact, don't tell Zosui, but I personally think the box should be destroyed. Nobody needs that thing if it's a real weapon." Yahiko nodded. "All right, duly noted. Where can we find them?" "In a fortress, just beyond Kanabi Bridge. Do be careful though. That's where the heaviest fighting is located." They all thanked him for his help and began to rush off in the direction of Kanabi Bridge. As they did so, they passed through intense fighting. They attempted to steer clear, but there were times that they'd be spotted and would be chased by Konoha and Iwanin alike, but they always managed to get away. Eventually, they made it to the bridge and stopped only when they heard the sound of 3 voices. They couldn't make it out as they walked over the bridge, so they stayed vigilant. As they moved through, the voices subsided, which could be either very good or very bad. As they walked, they stopped when Naruto called out to them. What's this? Nagato walked over towards Naruto was and looked down off the side of the bridge. His face turned pale as his eyes widened. Bomb! Bomb! Get off the bridge! They turned and began to run towards the other side. Suddenly, before they could reach it, the explosives went off and the bridge began to collapse underneath them. They fell into the river below and were washed away. As they floated away, Yahiko could only remember the sound of water and the faint light of the sun shining down. His eyes opened up to see that he was beneath the waves. He quickly began to kick, swimming up to the surface where he took a deep breath. He wasn't alone though. He saw Konan under the waves as he came up, so he quickly dove back down and grabbed her hand. He swam upwards until they were both above water. Once they got to land, he pulled Konan a little further up. Yahiko sat there for a moment and tapped her cheeks, but there was no response. He listened to her chest only to hear nothing. He immediately felt panic. He took a deep breath and began to work. He angled her head up and began chest compressions. Please, Konan, you gotta do it. You can't die. That's an order. Wake up. He continued to perform CPR. Come on, wake up. Wake up. Suddenly her eyes shot open and she vomited out water. She struggled to breathe. She sat there for a moment, just coughing and expelling water from her lungs. Tears dripped down her cheeks. Whether they were from fear or from strain, he didn't know, but he could just make it out despite the dripping of her hair. She took a deep breath and quivered as the breath let out in terror. She was crying out of fear. He pulled her into his embrace. It's okay. It's okay. I got you. I got you. She pressed against him as he wrapped his arms around her. He shushed her like a loving parent would, all while keeping his eyes peeled. There were no signs of enemies nearby. Konan raised her head up once she had finally managed to regain her bearings. Where's Nagato and Naruto? Yahiko looked around. No idea. Konan sat up. You don't think that they... Yahiko shook his head. No, it would take a lot more than a little water to keep them down. They're probably just out looking for us. We shouldn't keep them waiting. Yahiko stood. Let's make our way back to Kanabi Bridge, or whatever's left of it. So Yahiko and Konan began their trek back. On their way, they found Nagato. Yahiko sighed in relief. Ah, Nagato. You can't even begin to understand how happy I am to see you. Nagato would just walk over and embrace them both. Konan would look around. Where's Naruto? Nagato would look around. I thought he was with you. What, did he never surface? Yahiko stood there silently for a moment. What should we do? Konan asked. Looking to Yahiko, Nagato's eyes bore the same look in them. Yahiko then spoke. We'll continue on with the mission. Naruto knows where we're going. I have faith that he survived, and he's likely already heading there like Nagato was. We'll continue the mission and meet up with him either during it or after it. The three of them nodded, and so they made their way to Kanabi Bridge, where they stopped for a few minutes to look around and see if they could spot Naruto anywhere. But unfortunately, he was nowhere to be seen. Shoot, Yahiko said. Let's keep going. Maybe he's already at the fortress, or perhaps he went back to Kusa to meet up with us. Konan and Nagato's faces were both possessed by fear, and despite the optimism Yahiko was putting out, he too was terrified. But he had to have faith. They had a mission to accomplish, and they all knew the risks, and he had to maintain a level head to keep his other friends safe. So he led them on. Eventually, they found the fortress that Commander Kiryu had told them about. They began the process of recon. It was a large walled complex with a big building in the middle. What do you see, Nagato? They asked their compatriot. Nagato looked down upon the complex from the mountainside they were on. Not much. There are some squads of Iwan down there, but I can't see through walls or anything, so... Yahiko looked to him. Use your scouting technique. Nagato looked back and then to the sky. But there's not a single cloud in the sky. If I suddenly make it rain, people will probably get suspicious. Yahiko nodded in understanding, but he looked back to him. If Naruto's nearby, then you can use it to detect him. Nagato thought for a moment and nodded. Suddenly, as he weaved hand signs, it began to rain all across the area. As Nagato predicted, some of the shinobi thought it was strange that it would randomly start to rain, but unlike their prediction, these shinobi seemed to have been too preoccupied to care whether the sky had been overcast or not prior to this. Yahiko looked to Nagato. Did you find him? Nagato shook his head. I don't detect Naruto anywhere within my range. Both Konan and Yahiko's hearts dropped. He's dead. He drowned, a voice said in Yahiko's head. He's gone. Yahiko shook his head to shut the voice up. He must have just gone back to Kusa. A smart move. Let's continue the mission without him. How will we get in? Nagato asked. Konan then used her paper to form them wings like that of angels that they could use to hover down into the complex. They would ride the wind down and land on a building. From there, they climbed off the side and began to sneak about. Where should we go? Konan asked. Yahiko scoffed. To the biggest building, of course. Do you think they'd put the box anywhere else? They made their way to the building, avoiding the patrols. They would then enter. So I assume we just grab the thing and run? Nagato asked. Yahiko nodded. Simple infiltration, collection, extraction. Doesn't look simple, Konan pointed out. The box was massive. It bore the faces of what looked like lions on it. Suddenly, Nagato pointed. Look, over there. They all looked to see Naruto lying on a table. They rushed over and unstrapped him. The 8 trigrams on his stomach was visible, signifying that they had tampered with it, likely drawing his chakra out. Konan lifted Naruto up and held his head as the others checked on him. He has a pulse and he seems to be healthy. He must just be low on chakra, Yahiko said. He looked to Nagato. Do you have one of those ration pills? Nagato fumbled around his many pockets until he pulled one out. Yahiko would produce a canister of water out of his own pocket. He would open Naruto's mouth and put the pill in, as well as pouring in some water. Konan leaned his head back and a gentle rub to his throat caused him to swallow. They stood around him, hoping for some sign that he was okay. Eventually, Naruto's eyes opened slowly and the team let off a collective sigh of relief. Where am I? He asked. You're in Kanabi Fortress, Yahiko said. Can you tell us what happened? Naruto sat forward, capable of sitting up on his own. It's a little blurry, but after the bridge was blown, I hit the water hard and I must have hit a rock because I was unconscious. The next thing I remember was laying on the shore as a bunch of voices gathered around. They lifted me up and began to drag me away. I woke up strapped here, and that guy, Nishikiyama, began to siphon my tailed beast chakra. He was putting it in the box. He was cut off as another voice spoke up. A man stepped in, his hair slicked back with a devious smile on his face. So I could have my dream fulfilled, and now you'll see it with your own two eyes. Dream? Konan asked. Nishikiyama smiled. Of course. I'm about to become a god. My wish is to become an all-powerful, immortal dragon. Yahiko rushed over. Like hell. He began to weave hand signs and let loose a massive wave of water. Nishikiyama weaved his own hand signs, and suddenly the stone floor below them rose to dam off the water. The man laughed as he then forced the ground below him to lift up towards the ceiling like a massive pillar rising from the ground. Eventually, he pressed the rock through the ceiling. Come on, we gotta follow him, Yahiko shouted. They rushed outside and began to climb up the building. They reached the top and got onto the roof. Once there, they witnessed Nishikiyama standing before the opened box. They rushed but couldn't get there soon enough. He looked into the box. And now, that which I've desired since childhood will become reality. I'll ascend and become a dragon. He stepped into the box and the box then closed. Suddenly, the box shook violently, and just then the door opened and from within came out a massive beast, winged and feathered. Satori is what it had been called in ancient times, but now its name was lost. In a way, Nishikiyama's wish had been granted, but the box's wish had been granted as well. And from there, Nishikiyama flew around as the other shinobi of the fortress gazed upon him. Little did they know that he would be their end. He began to scoop them up and cast them into the box as well. Those that did not flee were cast into the box. The Akatsuki stood there in awe and terror at this beast. After a moment of gathering themselves, Yahiko shouted, "Attack!" They all ran towards their enemy. Yahiko formed a Rasengan as he looked back to Konan. Figure out how to close that box. We'll keep it distracted. Yahiko, Nagato, and Naruto all rushed forward with their Rasengan and struck Nishikiyama. Despite the level of attack, it did nothing to damage him. As they fought, Konan also defended herself while reading the inscriptions on the side. It was ancient writing, but not too different. As she read, she understood. We gotta put the beast back in. Easier said than done, shouted Naruto. She entered the fray. As they continued to fight, it was becoming obvious that Nishikiyama had the upper hand. He pushed them all back. With each of his massive feet, he pinned Naruto and Yahiko down. He grabbed Konan and lifted her into the air, preparing to devour her. In a moment of terror, Nagato screamed out and subconsciously activated his Rinnegan, making use of the Diva Path to push it back. It tried to stand as Nagato lifted it into the air. Naruto, Yahiko, and Konan were all surprised by this. Nagato took a deep breath as Nishikiyama came at him again. He raised his hand and utilized Almighty Push to drive it back in the box. With this done, they quickly closed it. Nagato lowered to the ground and nearly passed out. They each caught him. What was that? Naruto asked. Yahiko shrugged. Konan spoke. It was just like when we were kids. He managed to make use of his powers to protect us. He did it again. The fortress had been decimated by the attack, and no Iwanin were left to inhabit its walls. They would realize just how dangerous this box was, and so Nagato would make use of the Chibaku Tensei to lift it into the air and send it out into space, so that it could never be used as a weapon against mankind again. They would return to Zosui, who would refuse to pay them for not returning the box, but they were content knowing that they did the right thing. They would make their way back home, to Amagakure. They'd enter the base and take a load off to heal. It was then that they'd be approached by a man in a swirling mask. This man attempted to join their organization, but his methods stood against everything that Yahiko believed in, so he was sent away. It seems our fame is spreading, Nagato said. Yeah, for better or for worse, Yahiko would respond. They didn't truly know how bad it was though, as Hanzo of the Salamander, the shinobi they looked up to the most, was approached by Danzo Shimura of Konoha, who told him that the Akatsuki were against him, and Danzo was certain that he could prove it to them. All he needed was a little time. You see, that's the tragedy of the situation. War isn't just something you can stop with words, not always. It's why the old adage exists in the first place. If you want peace, prepare for war. Because for every person out there who wishes for peace, there is a person lusting for war. And such people are angry, violent, and aggressive. They'll do anything in their power to provoke such a war. While our hopes as peace lovers is to rise above this isn't always possible, and there are some people you just can't live with. This is the importance of a peaceful nation possessing a military. You can control your own actions, but you can't control others. And when wars inevitably do come, you must be ready to defend yourself. Soldiers in the civilized world are not agents of chaos, no, quite the opposite. They're agents of peace who take up their weapon and get their hands dirty so that peace may resume as quickly as possible, no matter the cost. And this hard lesson is one that the Akatsuki are about to find out for themselves. Word reaches the Akatsuki that the Hidden Stone are attacking villages outside of Ame, and so they immediately load up and begin to rush off to protect that village. There, they hope to foster peace, going so far as to tell the vengeful villagers to drop their weapons. They go off to speak with Iwa's shinobi, but instead they are attacked. It's here that Yahiko accidentally kills his first human. That hits him hard, but the fear of building in Nagato hits him hard as well. It's then that, as he summons the ghetto statue to wipe out the enemy, that Yahiko tackles Nagato and brings him back to his senses. This was all but a ploy though, and a frame job, as Danzo uses this to prove that the Akatsuki have turned against Hanzo, and so Hanzo begins to work in collaboration with Danzo in destroying the organization. All the while, Yahiko, feeling the guilt of his first kill, hopes to pass the position of leader off to Nagato, the only one he feels is capable of actually bringing about the peace they desire. It's then that Danzo appears, pretending to be an emissary of Hanzo, wishing to offer an invitation to Yahiko and Nagato. They go alone to speak with Hanzo, only for it to be revealed that it's a trap. It's then that the rest of the Akatsuki discover this fact. They inform Naruto. He looks at the message and feels his heart drop. "Crap, get all the men together," he shouts. "We gotta get to Hanzo before Nagato and Yahiko." And so Naruto and his forces rush out. But before they can reach the others, they're stopped by Tobi and Zetsu, who attack them. Naruto leads the forces against those of the white Zetsu, while Kyusuke and Daibutsu rush forward to do battle with Tobi. As they fight though, Kyusuke is killed and Daibutsu perishes. Tobi rises into the air and Naruto's eyes go wide. "Retreat! Get back!" Suddenly, from above rains down a hailstorm of wood-release spikes. Naruto and his forces are running. Suddenly, Kie, another member of the Akatsuki, jumps to cover Naruto. The spike hits Kie and passes through him, further impaling Naruto and knocking him to the ground. Naruto just lays there. It's at this time that in the distance, Nagato finds Yahiko on the end of his own blade, and it's then that their world changes forever. And scene. That's where I want to leave it for now. I know this one was a long time coming, and I'm hoping that in the future, the next episode comes a little quicker. I really enjoyed writing this one. Naruto being in the Akatsuki is always a fun idea I've toyed with, so it's nice to see it come to life like this. Anyway, let me know what your favorite part was, and where you think this would go in the future. I'm always open to hearing your wonderful ideas. Until next time, peace.
Did you enjoy our video? Well then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.